Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? Good morning. It is Friday, July 30th, 2021. Last show of the week, last show of the month, last show before the big hiatus, last show where I don't know. Yeah, I can't come up with anything else. Not quick enough this morning on my feed. All right, well, good morning. We'll do it live one more time before taking the big break. I've been working on putting together some material that you can use to keep yourself company, I guess. We won't be brand new live like that morning's news, and that pains me greatly, but hey, how are you going to deal with taking a break like this without... Alright, so anyway, so we'll leave a little something behind for you. No idea yet whether I'm going to make it across a line where there's something new every single day. I don't think so. Running out of time on that one, but working on it. Anyway, plenty going on that we still haven't got to, and I guess today can be sort of a competition with myself over what can I squeeze in, what stories, or maybe the competition is among the stories. I don't know. How would you put this? Which ones are important enough to get airtime before we take off for the big break? I don't know. I think I'm kind of obsessed with that at this point. Every day this week has felt like Friday as a result, and so I don't know, let's just dive in. It's Friday, so Greg's not here to do pandemic news, but I do see that there's quite a bit, and I guess Republicans getting upset with things as more restrictions are imposed. Mask mandates are coming back. Of course, I mentioned yesterday that the House erupted in Republican feigned anger over the return of the mask mandate. I missed this entirely, but I see that they've pulled another publicity stunt type thing yesterday. I guess for some reason, and I'm not 100% sure what the reasoning is, but we can take a guess at it. The Capitol Physician, or the Office of the Attending Physician, has recommended a mask mandate for the floor of the House, but has apparently not done the same for the Senate. My guess, if that is in fact the case, is, well, of course, the Senate is that much less populous. Only 100 members of the Senate, 435 members of the House who are, in fact, representatives, but of course, a few more representing various U.S. territories and the, as yet, unrepresented as a state, Washington, D.C. And so, if a vote is going on, it's a much more crowded place. And, of course, when it comes to even just routine debate, senators are actually sort of physically distanced as it is. The desks are, of course, right next to one another, but rarely are all the desks filled. But senators tend to stay at their desks when they speak. And, I don't know how wide the desks are, but there's some distancing involved, and just a lot fewer people in circulation. That's my best guess as to why he would do one side of the House and not the other. I mean, I think it would probably have been wise to do everything, but whatever, I don't know. The word is that he didn't, and the word comes indirectly from my catching some tweets this morning. Apparently, in a publicity stunt, a number of the House members protesting the mask mandate went over to the Senate side. I'll have to take a look at this. I think Scott Wong apparently was the one tweeting this. I'll see if I can find the thing. But I saw that tweet. I wonder if there's more to the story. Let's see. How does he designate his thing here? No, I got the wrong one. Anyway, the picture I took of it. Yes, okay, Scott Wong, D.C. That's the address I'm looking for. What he's got is a picture of House members in some sort of protest walking over to the Senate side where there's no mask mandate, which is, I mean, I guess they did do a good job in highlighting the ridiculousness of that imbalance. I mean, if you're just going to if you're going to pack the Senate side full of unvaccinated idiots, then I guess you should have a mask mandate there. But then again, the Republicans have been trading on the intentional confusion over what some of these mask mandates are really about. I did see yesterday, again, I believe the mask mandate for the House side is for the House floor. I don't know whether it's the entire House side of the Capitol complex. I think it's probably just for the House floor. But then I saw Nancy Mace, the once allegedly moderate-ish Republican representing the part of the Charleston area. And in fact, my own parents in their place in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. The mask mandate was meant to cover the floor, but she cut a video nonetheless, basically of her doing her Trumpster tough talk. It's been a while since, I guess somebody convinced her that she wouldn't win her primary, or that she could be primaried from the right unless she got very Trumpy. She started off as, if not, I don't know, not an anti-Trumper, but certainly flirting with anti-Trumpism. It was very critical and distanced herself from Trump, but has realized, or has been told, that she's got to change her tune if she wants to survive in the House. And apparently she thinks some people want to see her survive in the House. I don't know anybody else who does, but whatever. So anyway, she cut a video yesterday saying, Nancy Pelosi, come and get me. You can't make me wear a mask. I'm walking in the tunnels of the House side and I'm not wearing a mask. You can't make me wear a mask outside the House. No, you got to come and get me. But I don't think that there is any mandate outside of the House floor. But whatever. The point is that she meant to make herself look tough. And why she couldn't simply say, I won't wear a mask on the House floor, I don't know. Just face the fines and pay them if you're that tough. Anyway, here's some video from Scott Wong showing House members walking maskless over to the Senate side and then standing outside of the Senate chamber without masks and taking selfies of themselves, standing around defying the rules. But of course, they're not entering the Senate chamber, and I don't know that they are allowed to. I mean, perhaps in their normal circumstances, they might be able to, one or two at a time, access the floor, but they don't have the capacity for a big group, and it's the Senate. You're not members of the Senate. Get lost. But that's the thing. Anyway, I just thought it sort of encapsulated Republican COVID policy in a nutshell, in that you have a protest going on, and it's I took a screenshot of a certain moment in the video and then zoomed in on it. But here they are executing a stunt and taking selfies, and how else could you not? I mean, there's no better way to encapsulate Republican response to COVID. It's all about ourselves individually, whereas you might remember all the corporate advertising being about we're all in this together. And that theme came up earlier today, too, as Amanda Marcotte was trying to encapsulate what it was that made people mad about being asked to mask again, but particularly people who actually really do take the virus seriously. She was saying, for people who want to make this personal, it's really not. I don't live in a hot spot. Oh, I think I must have jumped onto the wrong spot of the... oh, no, there's a whole chain here. But I don't live in a hot spot, and so the CDC mask recommendation doesn't affect me personally. My anger is that people who did the right thing are being asked to do more, so that some folks can do nothing at all. And I think a lot of people really agree that is what's making us mad about it. By the way, it's what makes a lot of people mad about taxes as well. Right? I have to continue to pay more, or there's no tax cut for me, but so that the wealthiest in the country can continue to pay less and less, or even zero, or corporate entities can pay zero taxation as well. That's going to make a lot of people mad. But there you go. There's a lot of it's not the widest spread sentiment that I've seen on the left with regard to imposing mask mandates again, but it is fairly substantial. People who say it's really ridiculous that I'm being asked to sacrifice again. I I did the right thing. I wore the mask when they wanted us to wear the masks, and I got the shot when they wanted us to get the shot, and they told me that if I got the shot, finally, they told me if I got the shot, I could take the mask off. And now the word is, because of people who won't get the shot, I got to put the mask back on. Of course, it's not that big of a deal. To me, I'm happy to do it. I never actually stopped with the mask inside any place, but then I try not to spend any time inside any other places if I don't really have to. I mean, I go shopping. I haven't been having deliveries this whole time or anything like that. But when I go in the store, I wear a mask, and I didn't stop. And so I guess for me, it's less of an imposition. I don't know. All right, well, here we go. This is about how we'll approach the show today. We'll go and fish out what else is in pocket. There were some other coronavirus-related stories that I had spotted, but I thought that was a good place to start. Also forgot, of course, to acknowledge the morning tweet from Bill here, and let's see what he's got on tap for us. If you don't know what you're going to do with the show, you can always ask Bill. Kagro in the Morning is live now. This morning, Kagro X, me, David Waldman, will ask you, to do even more stuff you don't want to do so that others, see, I knew he was on this theme, so that others who don't want to do it can continue standing around not doing it. Let's go team. That's right. It's all a team. Team. It's the baseball bat scene from The Untouchables. Enthusiasms. That's where that comes from. Everyone knows that.
Enthusiasms.
Exactly. All right. So let's see. Other things that I put aside that were pandemic related included this interesting tweet and chart from a frequently called name, Dr. Eric Feigl-Ding. I really hope I'm pronouncing that name right since I've done it so many times here. But he was tweeting this chart around from where? I don't know. Washington Post had the chart, but I don't know what the original source of it is. But I think if we click on it, we'll see. But here's the long and short of the chart as he tweets here, Holy Mother, and then just stops there. The worst CDC Delta variant report ever. The lowlights of it being that they find Delta variant to be more contagious than smallpox. Let's see. Double the transmission rate of the first round of the virus as discovered in Wuhan. More severe than ever if you actually get sick from it. Vaccinated people can transmit the disease, and breakthrough viral loads are possible to pass on to the unvaccinated. Or breakthrough viral loads for the unvaccinated, I guess, when they actually come down with the thing. I'll have to fish out this other thing I saw circulating too, which was a good explainer, I thought. I don't know if it's right, but it's the sort of thing that makes a certain amount of sense and sounds true, so sort of truthy, I guess, that might convince you to put your mask on even if you're vaccinated. Let's see if I can dig that up. But this chart is of, let's see, I'll open up some of the links here and then blow up the chart. Transmission of Delta variant versus ancestral strain and other infectious diseases. So it's a chart of, let's see, our vertical axis is fatality rate on a logarithmic scale. And our horizontal axis is what? I guess what Greg taught us was the R0 value. That's the average number of people infected by each sick person is what it says. And I think that's how he defined the R0. Oh, here we go. The original graph is from the New York Times, and I guess their original rendering of it, is this an update or something, was from February 28th, 2020. I guess they were putting the SARS-CoV-2 original strain on the chart and taking a look at it that way. But let's see. The SARS-CoV-2 Delta variant. Yeah, okay. So it's not as deadly as some of the other diseases that are on the chart. And that's good news. But generally speaking, it's probably on average, it looks like more deadly than the swine flu, and certainly more so than the seasonal flu. Less so than smallpox, but more contagious than smallpox. Chicken pox looks to sort of approximate the Delta variant in terms of its transmissibility and the average number of people infected by each sick person, but not as much as measles. It looks like it occupies sort of a box on the graph, so that I would guess the R0 value ranges from about 5 to what appears to be, 8 or 9, I suppose, on this scale, whereas measles comes down at 15. But the original SARS sits somewhere in the neighborhood of 1.2 to 3.5 or something like that. And this just that much more contagious. Only slightly more frequently fatal than the ancestral strain, but still not good, to say the least. All right, well, we'll see if we can't share that with you, and you'll be able to take a look at the chart yourself when we get our summary out. For those of you, well, how would I say this? Scott tells me that we're off the air on TuneIn, about which I can do almost nothing because I have like zero actual contact with TuneIn. It's one of those streaming sources that was just, I don't know, they just take the stream and put it out there. I may have asked them to do it. I might not have. You never know. Of course, if you're listening on TuneIn, you're SOL, and I can't help you. You don't hear this. And now Scott says it's everywhere, it seems. Okay, well, let's see. Any word from Justice says this, the original and still best Netroots radio stream is working. So that's good news. Hopefully you're able to hear it there. All right, let's see. Anything indicating that there's anything wrong on this side? No. So the news is that, at a minimum, you're going to get a podcast out of it. That's good news. All right. Well, sorry for those of you who can't hear me, but you're all ugly and I hate you. I don't know. What can I say that we can make fun of and take advantage of the situation? I don't know. Well, you'll hear it on the podcast, so I just ruined it. All right. Well, have a nice day. What else do we have in pocket by way of COVID stuff? I wanted to take a look at this piece from, I mentioned it yesterday, Washington Post has the write-up on what's going on in Britain. Something strange. That's it. That's all I can tell you about it. It's strange, and the strangeness involves COVID cases plummeting instead of soaring. So a lot of people are pointing to this and saying, maybe, just maybe, if conditions are the same and things make sense and logic prevails, the Delta variant surge in the United States will follow the same pattern, and we'll just start to see the numbers drop again in about 2 to 3 weeks. I guess they're running about 2 to 3 weeks ahead of us on that. And that would be great because there's no end in sight otherwise. The Delta variant spike has got us up and approaching 100,000 new cases a day again for the first time in a long time, since probably February or so, according to the Worldometers numbers that I was looking at. And Florida approaching 20,000 cases a day as it tops, well over 16,000 yesterday and just seems to be increasing at a rapid rate. Let's see what the Post has to say about this and see if we can make some sense of it. I don't know that we'll find the other tweet I was looking for before the break, but maybe during the break I can grab it, and then we can move on from the virus news. Carla Adam and William Booth reporting for the Post. This is a puzzler. Coronavirus cases are plummeting in Britain. They were supposed to soar. I guess they did at first, and then they stopped soaring. Scientists aren't sure why they haven't, which is not, great. The daily number of new infections recorded in the country fell for 7 days in a row before a slight uptick on Wednesday, when the country reported 27,734 cases. That's still almost half of where the caseload was a week ago. The trajectory of the virus in Britain is something the world is watching closely and anxiously as a test of how the Delta variant behaves in a society with relatively high vaccination rates. And now, people are asking if this could be the first real-world evidence that the pandemic in Britain is sputtering out. after 3 national lockdowns and almost 130,000 deaths. Public health experts alongside the government predicted that cases would be rising in Britain at this point, perhaps even exponentially. The highly contagious Delta variant of the virus, first detected in India, accounts for almost all new cases here. That would be there in the UK. On July 17th, the number of new day cases reached 54,674, the highest since January. 2 days later, dubbed Freedom Day by the press, Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government ended almost all government mandates in England for mask wearing and social distancing. Pubs are serving pints at the rail, and nightclubs have reopened with maskless youths packed on the dance floors. Viral defense is now a personal choice, just like here. And so, some of the best infectious disease modelers on the planet warned that 100,000 new cases a day this summer could be expected, but the trend since then has been a sharp decline. That is interesting. Schools have closed for summer break, so children are not spreading the virus as much. Test and trace might be working. Last week, almost 620,000 people were pinged by a National Health Service app in England and Wales, telling them to quarantine after exposure to the virus. It is also possible that people have stopped getting tested, because if they test positive, even if they are fully vaccinated, they are asked to quarantine for 10 days, even if they are about to travel abroad for their holidays. All right, and that probably turns them off a bit. Or maybe Britain has reached an immunity threshold. More than 70% of adults here are fully vaccinated, and 88% have had a first dose, one of the best vaccine uptakes in the world. Among those who remain unvaccinated, many have had COVID or asymptomatic infection. Britain could be approaching population immunity, with people immune either from vaccinations or natural infection, said Paul Hunter, a professor in medicine, you see the way they write that there, at the University of East Anglia. He noted that the reverb from Freedom Day wouldn't be instantaneous. Any bump in cases would start to show up later this week or early next, as symptoms can appear up to 2 weeks after exposure. But he predicted overall we won't see the huge surges that we've seen in the past. Be careful. Just wait before you say it. I mean, really. Anyway, Martin McKee, professor of European Public Health. Interesting. European, not just, European Public Health at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. It's not usually where I think London School goes to. But anyway, he said he doubted that Britain was reaching population or herd immunity, in part because that wouldn't explain regional differences. I don't have a simple answer. None of us do, he said. Johnson is not celebrating, not yet, speaking to reporters on a rainy Tuesday from under an unusually smallish umbrella. That's interesting. What a note. And it's linked here. Maybe you'll want to take a look at it. Is it unusually smallish? Show me The Guardian. Oh, yeah, he's got like a little totes umbrella, which I guess isn't all that often spotted in the UK, where they take their umbrellas seriously. Okay, well, there you go. The Prime Minister said that, yes, he has noticed the better figures, but he added it's very, very important that we don't allow ourselves to run away with premature conclusions about that. That's a smart thing to say. People have got to remain very cautious, and that remains the approach of the government. Hospitalizations and deaths are still rising, though at a far slower rate than during previous waves. More than 6,000 COVID patients are in hospitals in Britain, the highest figures since March. On Wednesday, Britain reported 91 new deaths, but the people so want the pandemic to end. The Daily Mail's front page Wednesday declared, "COVID is all over, bar the shouting." We'll see. On Wednesday, the government announced that fully vaccinated visitors from the United States and Europe could travel to England starting August 2nd without quarantining. The reverse is not true, however. Even as England is reopening, the United States has kept restrictions for travelers from Britain and the European Union in place. Stephen Griffin, an associate professor at the University of Leeds, said the reduction of cases was very, very strange. He cautioned that further data needs to be analyzed, but suggested that it could be the result of a raft of behavioral factors. ranging from the warm weather to people following quarantine guidance to people avoiding tests if they want to go on vacation. Another factor is the end of the Euro 2020 soccer tournament, which drove thousands into pubs and onto the streets. All of these things compounded together may genuinely reflect a reduced number of tested positive cases, he said. Whether that actually reflects infection or not, we don't know. Neil Ferguson, an epidemiologist at Imperial College London, whose models have shaped government policy in Britain and the United States, said it now appears possible that the pandemic could be in the rearview mirror. He added his own notes of caution, too. He told the BBC on Tuesday that the effects of lifting restrictions on Freedom Day earlier this month have yet to be seen. Ferguson also said there could be a spike in cases if the weather turns bad or when schools return in September. We're not completely out of the woods, he said, but the equation has fundamentally changed. The effect of vaccines has been huge in reducing hospitalization risk and death, and I'm positive that by late September or October, we'll be looking back at most of the pandemic. Ferguson added, we will have COVID with us. We will still have people dying from COVID, just to be clear about that. But we'll have put the bulk of the pandemic behind us. Okay, good timing because the music's about to start. Voila, that's French, not English. But we've got through the article, finished that one up. We'll check in again with just a little bit more info. I'll see if I can find that tweet that I was talking about so I get it accurate. Otherwise, I'll do it off the top of my head. Oh, good idea from Scott, who suggests maybe Monday we could rebroadcast this show if it's really not coming through on most of the streaming services. But, all right. Well, taken under advisement. And I have 2 more minutes to take it that way, too. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Unsuccessful in finding the tweet that I was thinking of, and I think it was largely because the text that I was interested in was taken from a screenshot of whatever article they had picked this thing up from, and all they were commenting on there, the only thing that would be searchable was they said in one way or another, this is the best, attempt at explaining that I've seen so far why it would be necessary for us to be masked up again if we were already vaccinated. And as I recall the explanation, and it seemed to make sense to me, intuitively, but, I'm not an infectious disease expert, but the idea was, they said, well, the Delta variant in particular, I guess, appears to take up residence chiefly in the nasal passages, whereas as I recall, the earlier variants tended to, they entered through the nose, but they, what was that? I can't remember the medical terminology that I learned briefly when we were first dealing with COVID, but that it has, it tended to take up residence initially in the, nasopharyngeal, I don't know what to tell you, but all right. But it was higher up. You remember those initial tests where they really had to go way up through your nose, like halfway to your brain, to get the swab done, because it was way up high in the sinuses and in the soft palate and whatever. Anyway, apparently the Delta variant takes up its initial residence chiefly in the nasal, in the nose, and kind of stays there, and then works its way through down towards, down the bronchial tubes toward the lungs. It's not that it's, insupportable down there or anything, but it chiefly tends to take root there. And in the vaccinated, as the virus replicates, I guess, and begins to move down towards the lungs, which would be a more damaging place for them to take hold, at that point, the antibodies in the bloodstream, thanks to the vaccine, can really get at it, and there's just not enough, I guess, blood in circulation in the nose versus elsewhere in the in the lungs and in the bronchial tubes, etc. I don't know. Does that make any sense? But they were saying basically that nose covering, particularly with a good effective filter like you'd get with an N95 mask, is that much more important. Don't let that initial viral load take hold in the nose, and it's also easily expelled that way too. More so, I guess, than earlier strains. It seemed to make a certain amount of sense to me. I don't know whether that's, based in fact or anything, but it was taken from a screenshot somewhere. I wish I could dig it up, but I'll continue to look for it because I want to be able to explain it to my, to everybody I talk to about it and get it correct. But it seemed to make a certain amount of sense that there was a limited ability for the antibodies which you can produce once vaccinated to get at the viral load, from the bloodstream where they circulated, to get at the viral load in the nose as opposed to elsewhere in the body. And that's perhaps what made it, that was what was making it maybe more transmissible, because you were building up this viral load before antibodies could really get at the stuff. And it's what made it more transmissible because it's immediately available for expulsion, I suppose, and breathing or sneezing for that matter. And it was, I guess, supposed to explain how it is that the vaccinated were able to pass the viral load on so much easier than the original strain. So if that makes any sense to you, keep your nose covered. So not only be masked, but make sure you're wearing it properly, and that might help. What can I tell you? All right, let's see. Other items worthy of discussion today. Oh, I have the wrong email open here. So I want to see what else we might be getting through the usual email address rather than my other one. Okay, got it right. All right, and now the new Pocket format, the new Pocket, I don't know what we would call it exactly, a new unhelpful, helpful feature that used to be the case that for most stories parked in Pocket, you could click on it in Pocket and it would show you the Pocket preview of it, and then you had the opportunity to click to see the original, and then it would open up the original article in a new tab. And the new Pocket now does that about, 25% of the time. It does it with tweets for some reason, but with newspaper articles, it just opens them up in the same tab, which then means the tab I had kept open with Pocket so I could look back at the rest of the stories is gone, and you can't just jump back to it. So bad news, bad job updating your software Pocket. To hell with this. All right. Let's see. Other stories to share with you. Let's see. I'm going to skip some of these things about Kyrsten Sinema and where she may, in fact, be coming down in the anticipated voting on the budget questions and reconciliation and the BID, etc., because she's a flighty person and I never think she's going to, who knows where she's going to land. You just have to wait and see what happens. Rumors circulating that she may refuse to stick around if the August recess is canceled or shortened. Don't know whether there's any real truth to those rumors. It could, as others have pointed out, actually just be people either speculating about it or simply trying to make other people believe that she's threatening to do that so that they'll continue to get madder and madder at Sinema. There are, of course, those who would have an interest in doing just that. All right, let's see. We'll jump off of the coronavirus topic for the moment and move on to some of the other politics that I thought were interesting. Let's share a couple of other items here. Oh, still got more. Let's see. Scott says we're back. I guess what? I don't know. What are you listening on? I don't know what you're listening on, but probably not. Was it TuneIn? I mean, is that what you normally listen on, Scott? All right. Well, I should probably be ignoring that at this point. Let's take a look at this. I put aside this interesting sounding story from Salon the other day. Ask Ivanka. The Washington Post editorial board, and I missed this, the Washington Post editorial board calls on Democrats to subpoena Trump's daughter in the context of the January 6th committee, interestingly enough. And I missed this entirely. And apparently for the Washington Post editorial board to do it, I mean, not like I run and read everything that they do, but I thought that would rise to my attention at some point. Congress's January 6th Select Committee began on Tuesday. Will Democrats call on Ivanka Trump or Jared Kushner to testify? Friends say Ivanka and Jared are privately appalled at this headline and subheadline. John Skolnick wrote this up for Salon. Let's see what this is about. Totally missed this. The Washington Post editorial board is calling on Democrats on the January 6th Select Committee to subpoena Donald Trump's daughter Ivanka, his son-in-law Jared Kushner, and former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. Top of the list is precisely what then-President Donald Trump did before, during, and after the attack. They wrote in a Tuesday op-ed. How did he prepare his speech preceding the insurrection, in which he told the crowd to fight? What did he anticipate his audience's reaction would be? When did he know the pro-Trump mob was threatening the Capitol? And there's a link to the op-ed, which I missed, and maybe we could just read that word for word. All right, let's see. The board added, answering such questions calls for subpoenaing former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Mr. Trump's daughter Ivanka and her husband, White House Senior Advisor Jared Kushner, and other White House aides with useful information. Well, those are the people we want to talk to, people with useful information. According to a forthcoming book, oh boy, by Washington Post journalists Carol Leonig and Philip Rucker. It's not out yet. Ivanka Trump attempted to calm the former president. I don't know why I wish he was, but former president down on the day of January 6th, encouraging him to call off the violent riot, a request Trump repeatedly rebuffed. I'm going down to my dad. This has to stop, she reportedly told her aides while spending several hours walking back and forth from the Oval Office in an effort to defuse the situation. So you can see it was very desperate. She was walking back and forth for hours. In their op-ed, the Post's editorial board also called on the Select Committee to investigate a number of top Trump allies in Congress, including Kevin McCarthy, Mo Brooks, Jim Jordan, and Tommy Tuberville, all of whom the Post reports may have interacted with Trump on the day of the insurrection. We saw Jim Jordan admit as much the other day, or flub his denial, and apparently he has since been asked about it very directly again. And again, he attempts to deflect from having to answer the question, but I think he does come around finally and say, I talked to him that day. I don't know whether it was before or after or during. He has no recollection, apparently, of at what point during the day. I would think he would have pretty clear memory of that, but he says he doesn't. Anyway, McCarthy, who voted in favor of overturning the 2020 election, has been adamantly opposed to the Democratic-backed Select Committee and has often downplayed Trump's role in the insurgency. However, back in February, just a month after the riot, CNN reported that Trump and McCarthy had gotten into a, quote, shouting match over the former president's refusal to tell the rioters to stand down. Well, Kevin, Trump told McCarthy over the phone, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are. Everyone remembers that revelation. And his supposed response, who the F do you think you're talking to? said Mr. Tough Guy Kevin McCarthy, who then decided instead, maybe that's just not true. because he's been licking Trump's boots ever since. I guess, on the other hand, I suppose you could say, yeah, he's licking Trump's boots because that is true, and he has a lot of making up to Trump to do in order to, I guess, in his view, survive. So I guess it's possible. I don't know whether it's definitive either way. CNN also reported that, well, it says here representative, but we know it's Senator, right? Tuberville spoke with Trump on the day of the riot, calling the former president via phone. That's how you would do it. It wasn't via semaphore. To announce that Mike Pence, the former vice president, I knew I would get to say that phrase today, had been evacuated in time to avoid the violent horde, which I guess Trump regarded as bad news. The phone call has since come under scrutiny in light of Trump's tweet attacking Pence less than 10 minutes after the call. It's not clear whether Representative Brooks spoke with Trump on the day of the riot. However, the Alabama lawmaker did deliver a White House-approved speech during the Stop the Steal rally just outside the Capitol building, where he bandied Trump's election lies and told Trump's supporters, "Today is the day American patriots start taking down names." There was much more to that speech. Brooks has since personally disavowed the riot, directly attributing Trump for inciting the violence on January 6th. Is that right? The Post's editorial board also argued that lawmakers should put the leaders of far-right extremist groups on the stand, particularly leaders at the center of the violence, as well as Justice Department and Capitol Police officials who failed to anticipate the riot. Months after the riot, it was reported in various media that the Pentagon had denied multiple requests to deploy the National Guard even as the chaos was unfolding. Capitol Police also reportedly had extensive intelligence that there would be violence on January 6th, but the former Capitol Police chief dismissed the concerns as alarmist. Okay, that much we knew, but I missed the op-ed. Is there much more, do you think, to it than what was reported here? Let's take a look. Here it is. We have questions about January 6th. The new House committee can answer them. I don't know. I guess I'll take a look at their version of it rather than the salon summary of it. The House Select Committee investigating the January 6th Capitol insurrection begins work Tuesday. That much we know. Hearing from police officers. I'll skip all of this. Looking at the fact that the January 6th riot was a horrific attack on democracy in contrast to the narrative some Republicans have told of a loving crowd. Some Republicans. We know who that is. There's one Republican who says loving crowd. Filled with people behaving like average Washington tourists, we know who that one was, as is an essential part of the committee's work. But also in contrast to Republican claims, there is much for the Select Committee to uncover. Top of the list, right? Precisely what then President Donald Trump did before, during, and after the attack. Here I would have my questions. I'd love to see my questions answered. And I saw the other day, we got a lot of retweets for something that hadn't seen any action in some time, as Congressman Harley Ruda, retweeted this thing, and then people picked up on it. But my old question of how is it that at 3:30 p.m. on January 6th, the White House pool reporter is texting that there's no unusual activity at the White House, that what did they say? Active but calm. Things were happening, but things were calm. And my basic question being, with the Capitol under attack and the Vice President, Speaker of the House, Speaker pro tem, or the President pro tem of the Senate and the Senate Majority Leader, basically the whole chain of command, or the line of succession to the presidency, 2, 3, and 4, all evacuated by the Secret Service just 2 miles away from the White House, and the situation essentially out of control on Capitol Hill, that there's no reaction whatsoever inside the White House. The same White House where Trump bugged out to the panic room because there was a Black Lives Matter protest across the street and behind, 2 sets of fences, and he still bugged out for the bunker. How is it that this White House, there's no reaction to a Secret Service evacuation of the Vice President, Speaker of the House, and Senate President pro tem. That's crazy that would happen and there'd be no extra security precautions observable whatsoever over at the White House. The only way that makes any sense, of course, is if Trump is waving all of that off, or perhaps the Secret Service detail knows him well enough that they knew that he would wave them off. But he would only be waving them off because he's so sure of what the mob was there to do and who could really direct it. There was no chance that they were coming for him because that was his mob, and he sent them to the Capitol. So therefore, there was no danger to the White House or to him, to himself, and he got to sit and enjoy the view on TV instead, while everybody else in the line of succession to the presidency had to hide in bunkers because they were set to be murdered. I'd like to have some answers to that question, and I guess so would Harley Ruda. Anyway, so as they put it here in the editorial, top of the list is precisely what Trump did before, during, and after the attack. How did he prepare his speech preceding the insurrection, in which he told the crowd to fight? What did he anticipate his audience's reaction would be? When did he know the pro-Trump mob was threatening the Capitol? Why did he offer only mild statements long after the danger was clear? Did Trump-affiliated rally organizers coordinate with extremist groups? Answering such questions calls for subpoenaing former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, Ivanka, Jared, and other White House aides with useful information. Also relevant is what members of Congress reported to Mr. Trump and other members of his administration as the riot unfolded. McCarthy, who spoke with the president, and Kushner on January 6th must testify, along with any other lawmakers who interacted with the Trump administration in the run-up to, during, and after that day. The list includes Tuberville, Brooks, possibly, now we know better, the answer is yes, Jim Jordan. For that matter, the committee must examine whether any lawmakers themselves maintained connections with or even abetted the rioters, especially in terms of early reconnaissance tours. We have our suspicions about those too. Investigators should hear from extremist group leaders at the center of the violence. How did they prepare? What was their goal? The committee should also hear from Justice Department and Capitol Police officials who failed to anticipate the riot. Why did intelligence officials across the government seem unaware of warnings that were all over social media? To what extent did law enforcement discount or ignore warning signs about right-wing extremists because federal and local officers did not want to cross Trump and other Republicans? Why did the National Guard take so long to arrive? Finally, the investigation should lead to recommendations to forestall a repeat of such political violence, with a particular focus on how the government monitors domestic extremism. If they conduct their work, the lawmakers on the largely Democratic panel must suppress the urge to make it the partisan exercise that Republicans claim it will be. Don't worry about that. They're going to claim it is one anyway. Behaving instead like the fact finders the nation needs. Okay. Gosh, I hope we get that. I really would love to see the answer to some of those questions. All right, let's throw in a couple other things. Some more. How about more about the hearings? I liked the sound of this write-up here. Another opinion piece, this time in The Hill, written by Chris Kolesnik. Who's that? Can we skip down to the bottom and find out who Chris Kolesnik is? Chris Kolesnik is a 34-year veteran of federal government oversight. Spent 19 years as senior counselor and director of investigations for Chuck Grassley, so Republican. Kolesnik then became executive director of the National Whistleblower Center. Remember when Chuck Grassley was pro-whistleblower. Finally, he spent 10 years working with the Department of the Interior's Office of the Inspector General as Associate Inspector General for External Affairs. The headline in this piece, surprising given his background, Capitol Insurrection Hearing Exposes Trump World Delusions. I mean, not inexplicable. There's plenty of anti-Trumpers out there among the Republican Party, but whatever. I think that I find that interesting. Here's how he puts it now. If there were any doubt about which political party, it's his, and I think it's he, although it is K-R-I-S. You gotta, your guess is as good as mine. I don't think it says in the bio whether this is Mr. or Ms. Chris Kolesnik, or maybe neither. I don't know, but it's a Republican, so my guess is that they're still working under the old binary system. Anyway, if there were any doubt about which political party has the upper hand in the investigation into the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, it was erased during the first hearing of the House Select Committee established to investigate the attack. Republicans are squarely behind the 8 ball with few options for leveling the field. Really were squirming pretty bad. But, they set themselves up. If I were in former President Donald Trump's employ, I'd jump out the window. I would fear coming within his throwing distance. I've seen him throw, by the way. Don't worry about it. Tuesday's hearing, the table setter for the committee's efforts, as we learned in talking to one of the old committee hands, or hearing from one of the old committee hands when Greg updated us earlier this week, was a textbook display filled with credible, heroic victims giving gut-wrenching first-hand accounts of their violent ordeal on that day. Each gave his own riveting account of the physical and emotional hardships they endured while protecting the Capitol, its occupants, and our democracy. Their testimony was punctuated with ample, violent video footage. What? Okay, yes, video footage is the words I'm looking for. Don't know where that other one came from. 4 witnesses, all Capitol Hill or Washington, D.C. police officers, came across as bright, courageous, praiseworthy. No one, in my view, who heard their testimony or saw that video could conclude anything but that there was a violent insurrection attempt that day. The witnesses begged members of Congress to get to the truth. Every member on the committee pledged to do so. But that's because the saboteurs didn't show up. Committee members showed sympathy, respect, and empathy. Again, because the saboteurs weren't there. Every viewer at home had to be tearing up and nodding in approval. I was. Okay, a little projection, but all right. In terms of messaging and narrative, the committee hit a home run. Meanwhile, though the panel is bipartisan, with the inclusion of Republican critics Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, the hearing was free of stunts, with none of the usual Trump provocateurs. In other words, instead of the usual circus-like environment at House oversight hearings, it was a sober and mature setting for a change. Cut now to a scene across town in front of the Department of Justice, where right-wing Trump Republicans attempted to hold a press conference implying mistreatment of the rioters being held to account for January 6th, whom they called political prisoners. These Republicans have led the attempt to rebrand the rioters, whom the hearing successfully exposed as hostile goons, as peaceful patriots. By the way, I also saw via Twitter this morning that Paul Gosar has taken to wearing one of those rubber wristbands commemorating the death, like as a martyr, of Ashley Babbitt. I can't remember exactly what, the hashtag was that they put on the thing, but that's, now they're fully into the riot was actually a good thing mode. And Ashley Babbitt, the martyrization had begun even before that. Actually made me think of the thought that occurred to me the other day that they're treating Ashley Babbitt as sort of like the Q Bizarro World Rachel Corrie, the activist who was protesting the destruction. This is 15 years ago now. Protesting the destruction of Palestinian homes, I guess in the settlement areas, and stood in front of an Israeli army bulldozer that was demolishing the homes, but got run over and killed instead. And the right wing went crazy with this. They were making fun of her for weeks after her death. And this was interesting. I haven't seen anybody try this either, but people do remember that this is the case. And I learned a lot about where it came from, too, and it's kind of disappointing. But the right wing delighted in calling her, because she had been crushed by a bulldozer, delighted in calling her Saint Pancake. They thought that was hilarious. They call her Saint Pancake, flattened by a bulldozer. Because she thought she was so virtuous and good, the saint part, right? I found out, I don't think I had any memory of this part of it. I guess it's very disappointing to find out it was Charles Johnson, I guess, right, who I guess popularized that. The guy who, at the time, was still living in right-wing world as the author of the Little Green Footballs blog, who at some point allegedly had an epiphany of sorts, and certainly lands as an anti-Trumper now, but became sort of full-blown liberal leaning in this way. And it seems genuine enough. It's like years in duration now, but yeah, that was kind of rough. And there are still lots of people who are interested in calling him to account for that, and I guess it's only fair. But let's get ourselves in trouble too. I was just wondering, like, how would the people who delighted in calling Rachel Corrie, following his lead and selling T-shirts about Saint Pancake, how would they react to my, let's say, branding Ashley Babbitt Saint Donut, who had a hole shot in the middle of her? I don't think they would take that very well, right? But, of course, mine would be the outrage, whereas they were right, I don't know. So the flip side of that is I actually am right about this one. But okay, never mind. I won't put that much energy into it, and I won't sell any T-shirts probably, although that could be the merchandise that I've been waiting for this whole time. All right. Anyway, look, we'll bypass that and read the rest of this interesting article before we cut out for a minute here, too. Anyway, let's see. Cut to a scene now, right? It was across the town. All right. There was the Department of Justice protest. We already did read about that one. Ask any rational politician from either party, if you can find any, which image they would want to be associated with. It's a good bet they would aspire to the former. That is the sober setting of the hearings on Tuesday. Trump Republicans are in deep trouble. Not only do they not have a seat at the table by their own choice, nor Trump access to Twitter or Facebook, their Trump World alt message after the police officer's testimony seems Kafkaesque. Okay, well, we'll continue with this piece, and there's not that much more to it. And whatever else we decide, we will squeeze into our last show after this brief break. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show. Let's see, where we left off on this thing? Right, the Trump World alt message seeming Kafkaesque, right? It's not just calling the rioters patriots. Trump and his Republican allies have tried to turn the assault into hugs and kisses, which is amazing because, quite honestly, aren't we already at the point, long since arrived at the point where people are generally pretty wary of actual Trump hugs and kisses? They're pretty much an assault on their face. And it shouldn't surprise anybody that what Trump literally regards as hugs and kisses, and even in some of these cases, they actually are hugs and kisses from Trump, but everyone else who sees them recognizes them as assaults. So I'm amazed that he decided to stick his head in that particular bear trap, but he is an effing idiot, so there is always that by way of explanation. So, where were we with this? I already lost my place in this. Yeah, right. It's not just the calling the rioters patriots. Trump and his Republican allies have tried to turn the assault into hugs and kisses. No armed protest here, folks. Just a typical tourist day. One witness at Tuesday's hearings, in a display of dark humor, said he's still trying to recover from those hugs and kisses. Well, there are a number of teenage pageant contestants who would say the same, and they were serious about the actual hugs and kisses being what happened. Anyway, Republicans have also inexplicably made their big issue the claim that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is responsible for it all because she's responsible for security in the Capitol. Not only does that argument concede the riot wasn't all hugs and kisses, it's irrelevant. Pelosi is as responsible for the Capitol riot as Rudy Giuliani was for the 9/11 attack on the World Trade Center. The Republican message is nonsensical and devoid of credibility. Those who worship at Trump's altar, craving his ability to raise money and votes, are hamstrung. Once they buy into his delusions, there are few credible options for them to get out of the corner they backed themselves into. As a party, the Republicans can't handle the truth. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy both said they did not watch the hearing. The hearing was so powerful that had they done so, and I think they did, they would have had a Southwest Airlines commercial moment. What? Okay. Wanna get away. I see. That's how bad a position they're in. Pelosi often recounts the words of Benjamin Franklin, who, when asked outside the Constitutional Convention, maybe, in 1787, what kind of government we have, said, a republic if you can keep it. Similarly, the Select Committee now enjoys a decisive advantage over Trump Republicans, if they can keep it. Maintaining the advantage will be tricky. This first hearing was easy, a no-brainer. Credible and moving testimony from law enforcement hero victims is priceless for a hearing. The choreography for future hearings may be more challenging. It helps to not have the pro-Trump peanut gallery in play. Trump being banned from Twitter and Facebook is also helpful. Most helpful, though, are the Republican struggles with messaging and credibility. The takeaway moment for me came at the end of the hearing when the police officers were asked how they viewed the committee's task. One of the officers used an analogy. He said, when a hitman kills someone, you send the hitman to jail, but you also go after whoever hired the hitman. He said of the people who stormed the Capitol, a hitman sent them. I want you to get to the bottom of that. I think the real truth is that they were the hitmen, but they were hired by somebody. But okay, you get the idea. The committee needs to tread carefully but steadfastly to meet the mission. It cannot lose the advantage it has gained. This hearing was a good step forward to getting the truth. The committee shows, so far, they are ready for the battle. Okay. Wow. Well, that was, I think, well put, and keep in mind, written by a Republican, an anti-Trump Republican to be sure, but a Republican nonetheless. All right. Other news to share. Let's see. Gosh, where to go? Oh, well, I guess that would take us back to coronavirus, which I never really intended to go back to. But I was sort of interested in, I guess we'll note for the record, maybe with just the headline and a couple paragraphs, I think something we universally understand to be true now, but I happened to see from ABC News the other day, July 24th, states scale back virus reporting just as cases surge. We've talked about the states that have gone to weekly or even irregular or less than weekly reporting of their daily numbers. Florida being one of them. They're sort of back on a not daily schedule, but more frequent than weekly. And I've seen lots of people picking up on the theme of, by the way, that whole how Ron DeSantis won the pandemic thing. Like I said, they're posting like 16,000 new cases a day, and I think Texas was the next nearest challenger, and I don't even know if they made it to 4,000. I mean, which good, I'm glad they didn't, but Florida is far and away the worst in terms of their numbers in this new surge. And more than just the Ron DeSantis won the pandemic Politico framing was out there, as Dana Houle was pointing out. Rich Lowry at NRO, I think, at some point actually went with the headline of where does Ron DeSantis go to get his apology? A favorite theme among right-wing writers. I don't think any apology is coming. I think the better question is where does Ron DeSantis go to get his tar and feathers? It's another guy that people are going to wonder, history-wise, why he wasn't just dragged out of the governor's mansion. It's really insane what he's imposing on Florida at this point. But that there was a point at which everybody was like, he might have been the one who got it right the whole time. He won the pandemic. Where does he go to get his apology as the rest of the country dealing with a surge, but at maybe a quarter of the pace of Florida? Gee whiz, how did that happen? Florida man is governor, and look what happened. All right, so you can take a look at the rest of it. This article names some of the other states that are running away from daily reporting. And what do you think they have in common? Florida, Nebraska, Iowa, and South Dakota. It was no surprise at all to see Kristi Noem do that. She just basically said, oh, Ron DeSantis is doing that. I hope to compete with him for the presidency or the nomination for the Republican nomination at some point. I have to do the same thing. And so they did do that. In Nebraska, the state actually stopped reporting on the virus altogether for 2 weeks after Governor Pete Ricketts declared an end to the official virus emergency, forcing news reporters to file public records requests or turn to national websites that track state data to learn about COVID statistics. Other governments that have gone the other direction and released more information. Washington, D.C., for instance, adding a dashboard on breakthrough cases to show the number of residents who contracted the virus after getting vaccines. When Florida changed the frequency of its virus reporting earlier this month, officials said it made sense given the decreasing number of cases and the increasing number of people being vaccinated. Cases started soaring soon after, when you weren't getting numbers about what was going on, started soaring, and Florida earlier this week made up 1/5 of the country's new coronavirus infections. As a result, Florida's weekly releases, typically done on Friday afternoons, have consequences for the country's understanding of the current summer surge, with no statewide COVID stats coming out of the virus hotspot for 6 days a week. And so think about how dangerous that is. That, for one thing, if you're looking at charts that still are stuck in the old 7-day, floating average model, what are you getting by only looking at 1 day a week and not any sort of weekly total being released either, just daily numbers and once a week at that. And I guess given that, in 2 weeks, it's too late. Everybody who's, gotten the virus but doesn't know it yet is now sick 2 weeks later. And you've only had 2, maybe only 1, depending on how things fall, 1 reporting date in between. And there's just no warning to the rest of the country. It's about the worst thing I could imagine them doing at this point. But there you go. Anything more about the various different states, or in particular anything terrible about Kristi Noem? No, I don't see it in my quick scan through. But anyway, felt like that was worth mentioning. One of those things that I felt like squeezing in. Now you know what I thought was valuable for our last show. Let's see. Other things here, some of which are in tweet form. Yes, just I guess sticking briefly with the coronavirus thing. Big rash of stories of people whose, dying utterances in the hospital, or I wish I had gotten the damn vaccine kind of stories, or look at me, let me be your example. I didn't believe in the vaccine, and now here I am on oxygen, supplemental oxygen, and about to be intubated. And there's been dozens of them lately. And I thought this comment that I saw on Twitter sort of summed it up pretty well. It went along with this headline of Texas pastor sorry for refusing vax after near death. I don't know whether he got any closer to death in the ensuing days, but Julius Goat is the name on the handle on the account here reacting to this, although the name on it is A.R. Moxon, M-O-X-O-N. I don't know if that's actually his name or some reference to which I am not hip, but at any rate, I liked the summation. It's like a form of empathy, right? This whole, I'm sorry for refusing the vaccine. You should get it, right? Look at me. Look at my example. It's like a form of empathy, except they can only extend it to themselves. I've got the disease, and now I empathize. It's not empathy anymore. You actually have it. It's just experience. Empathy is when you see other people having it and say, I will take some action because I empathize with someone else's situation. This is just, I'm dying. Now I wish I wasn't. But it was a good point, and I thought well put. All right, let's see. I meant to keep that, but that's in pocket, so we can go back to that later. Jumping around a little bit more. All right, how about this one? I thought this was an interesting headline. Let's pick this one up. Switching gears. Merrick Garland needs to show he knows what January 6th was really about. That sounds like a good thing, and I think I would like him to show that. This is, it's getting up there in age. July 18th, 2021. In the New York Times, an opinion piece by Donald Ayer, Danielle Bryan and Norm Eisen, a deputy attorney general in the George H.W. Bush administration. Ms. Bryan, Danielle Bryan, is the executive director of the Project on Government Oversight, and Norm Eisen, of course, served as special counsel to the House Judiciary Committee during the first Trump impeachment. Their product here for the New York Times. Again, Merrick Garland needs to show he knows what January 6th was really all about. When Mo Brooks took his oath of office as a U.S. representative, he swore to support and defend the Constitution. And by the way, there's news about him. I noticed Albert Titus reminding me earlier today. Brooks apparently revealing in, interviews in a newspaper lately over his getting pulled into this thing because of his involvement in his speech, that the speech that they're talking about, he showed up to give that speech wearing body armor, which is an interesting choice. He says it was because he knew that there was some risk of violence that day, but it's very unclear. I mean, I don't know what kind of story he'll give, and I don't know whether it will help us get at the truth of why he did it. And one excuse he could offer up is, I heard Antifa was going to be there. As, lots of right-wingers and participants in the riot seemed sure that they had heard that Antifa was going to be there up until, there are still people who say, it wasn't even us. It was Antifa who rioted that day. That's falling by the wayside quickly. But at any rate, that could have been why he was wearing it. On the other hand, how about speculation that he was going to take place in the assault on the Capitol and thought he might get shot? I don't know if that was really it. I doubt it, I think, because I guess Mo Brooks, he can find his way into the Capitol with a member's pin. But just seemed like a weird thing that he would be doing, and, a lot of people would have some questions about that. So anyway, back to this. Mo Brooks, when he took his oath of office, he swore, of course, to support and defend the Constitution. His official duties, as we discussed earlier this week, certainly didn't include what Mr. Brooks is accused of doing in a civil lawsuit pending in Washington federal court, helping to incite a mob to storm the Capitol on January 6th. Representative Eric Swalwell, California Democrat, sued Brooks, an Alabama Republican, and others for damages suffered as a result of their roles in the Capitol riot. Sounds like my phone silencing program has been erased under new circumstances here. Pardon me for that. But anyway, Representative Eric Swalwell, filed the suit and suing Brooks and others for damages suffered as a result of their roles in the Capitol riot. Brooks has asked Attorney General Merrick Garland to certify that his actions on January 6th were those of a government employee acting within the scope of his employment. The Justice Department must say if it will defend Mr. Brooks by July 27th. That date has come and gone, and they have said no, right? If the Attorney General were to certify and the court agreed, Brooks would be dismissed from the lawsuit under a federal statute. The United States would be substituted as a defendant instead. So now I'm thinking, is the bulk of... did they expand beyond this in the article? Because it could be that this was written just as you saw on the 18th. And if the whole of it is just pleading with Merrick Garland not to take that position, then I guess it's pretty well covered, since he hasn't. But their reasoning might be of some interest still. Garland's choice is important in its own right, but it also carries ramifications for cases targeting possible official wrongdoing in the Trump era, I guess across the board, really, right? Including by the former president himself. Garland should emphatically reject Brooks's request to make this certification, because our nation deserves a full accounting for those involved in the storming of the Capitol and any other assaults on our democracy. The case arises from Brooks's appearance at the Save America rally. You know all about it, right? In our view, Brooks's instructions, that is, to fight for America, right? He went beyond those protections, so therefore he should not have the United States substituted for him in the suit. You remember what he said. He urged the assembled crowd to fight for America and stop at the Capitol, where the electoral transition would take place. Today, The curtain will be pulled back and American patriots will learn by their votes which Republican senators and congressmen have the courage to fight for America, Brooks said. Today, Republican senators and congressmen will either vote to turn America into a godless, amoral, dictatorial, oppressed, and socialist nation on the decline, or they will join us and they will fight and vote against voter fraud and election theft and vote for keeping America great. He added, today is the day American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass. In response to the suit, Brooks said, of course, that he was talking in his speech about the 2022 and 2024 elections. We all know what happened next, and we all know what happened with that incredible mistake that he made, too. Determining when arguably wrongful conduct by a federal employee nonetheless occurred within the scope of his or her employment duties often involves a difficult exercise of judgment. The issue is not whether the employee committed a wrongful act. Bad things can happen on the job. At the same time, not everything an employee does is within the scope of his job, as in the case of a mail carrier who takes his delivery vehicle on a joyride far from his route and hits a pedestrian. Okay. Because Congress has expressly made the United States directly responsible for the wrongs of employees while they are doing their jobs, the Attorney General and his delegates generally construe the scope of employment, this scope of employment concept broadly, some would say too broadly, to allow real bad actors in government jobs to be held to account. For example, the Justice Department recently certified scope of employment in a suit brought by former Ambassador Gordon Sondland against former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, alleging that Mr. Pompeo reneged on a promise to cover Mr. Sondland's impeachment-related legal fees. Interesting. I hadn't remembered that one. We also heard of course, about the E. Jean Carroll suit, but not about this one. Whatever the merits of Mr. Sondland's claims, the judgment whether to reimburse seems to be within the scope of Mr. Pompeo's powers as secretary. More controversially, during the last year of the Trump administration, the journalist E. Jean Carroll sued Mr. Trump in a state court in New York, alleging the rape that she finally publicly made in her book in 2019. We know that the Justice Department certified that the disputed statements from Trump were made within the scope of his employment as president, and William Barr moved the lawsuit to federal court. The court didn't buy it, rightly holding that Trump's statements have no relationship to the official business of the United States. The Justice Department appealed the ruling, and the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has elected to pursue the appeal and leave the ultimate decision of the issue to the court. There can be no doubt that the case of Mr. Brooks's behavior at the January 6th rally is a very different kettle of fish. For starters, House rules exclude broad categories of conduct from official duties that includes partisan campaigning or political activities like dark money and privately funded events on January 6th, for instance. It is difficult to imagine an act that falls farther outside the scope of a sitting congressman's official duties than what he is accused of doing, helping to provoke a crowd to lay siege on the center of our federal government, putting his fellow members at risk of physical harm, and ultimately disrupting the vital constitutional process of certifying presidential election results. The Constitution and laws of the United States are not, as Justice Robert Jackson once warned, a suicide pact. Certification that Mr. Brooks acted within the scope of his job would leave the United States government defending the right of its elected representatives to foment insurrection against itself. The decision before the Justice Department, again, already made, could also have an impact on other cases, including those against Mr. Trump. He, too, is a defendant in Representative Swalwell's suit over his incitement of the same rally, at the same rally. If Brooks is immunized, how long before Trump seeks the same? Phew. Well, I guess he won't. Or, well, he probably will seek it anyway, despite Brooks having lost. There is also the Georgia criminal investigation of Trump's efforts to have state officials fined 11,780 votes. He surely would point to any precedent Garland set here to argue that that was official too. Who knows what other yet-to-be-revealed conduct would be swept within this new safe harbor of wrongdoing, or for wrongdoing. Our future depends on our resolve in adhering to our basic democratic values, among them that truth is a key to the functioning of our electoral system, and that demands that Attorney General Garland unequivocally reject any notion that a congressman is doing his job when he foments a riot based on lies in order to sabotage a legitimate national electoral process. We agree, and as it happens, so did the Justice Department. That is good news, and I hope it sticks for other things. By no means a guarantee that Trump won't seek the same immunity anyway, just likely that he will not get any favorable recommendation from the Justice Department in seeking it from the courts. All right, let's see. Other important stories, I guess maybe in the same vein, sticking with the legal happenings. The Daily Beast of the other day, Jose Pagliari, Pagliari, yeah, that's right, but with a Y at the end instead of, all right. Anyway, D.C. Attorney General moves ahead with Trump inauguration suit. I've been waiting for these suits for a long time, and we all have been waiting a long time because there was only that one inauguration. That was back in 2017, right at the beginning of his term. 4 years we've been waiting for them to get to the bottom of what happened to all that money for the inauguration. An investigation into alleged self-dealing continues. Hello, I think we all made that call right away. Now that court-ordered mediation between the district's attorney general and the Trump inaugural committee has failed. This was published on the 28th, so just a couple of days ago. The Attorney General for the District of Columbia will continue investigating whether Donald Trump's 2017 inauguration committee misspent more than $1 million after discussions to resolve the matter out of court stalled this month. Of course, I'm still looking for proof that they ended up paying themselves appearance fees at the events, but I think they just laundered the appearance fees as other things. They weren't quite that brazen, but I thought that they might try. Anyway, the AG's office has a civil lawsuit against the inaugural committee and the Trump organization, and this month the case was forced into mediation, a deal-making session in which a neutral negotiator tries to get different sides to come to an agreement, in case you don't know what mediation is, but I believe you do. While lawyers met on July 14th to discuss resolving the case out of court, the meeting went nowhere. According to court records, the closed-door meeting resulted in no agreement reached. The reason? Investigators are dead set on seeing this case through to the very end, a source with knowledge of the case told the Daily Beast. That's rarely the case, but I hope it is. That means the case will proceed as all sides wait to see whether D.C. Superior Court Judge Jose M. Lopez, that's got to be driving Trump up the wall, rules that the local law enforcement agency has already proven its case before trial. The office of the local attorney general, Karl Racine, has a pending motion for summary judgment, arguing that the evidence already presented weighs that heavily in his favor. A little bit of legalese there, but basically, motion for summary judgment is, look, the facts speak for themselves here. There's no possible way that a jury or any other finder of fact could dispute the facts as laid out here. But essentially, I guess you'd have to say, like, no matter what the defense is offered by the other side, you still come to the conclusion that I don't know what the events are as we've described them here, and as a matter of law, since there's just no excuse that the evidence being offered up by the defense, there's nothing that excuses what we've been able to prove so far. You might as well just skip the trial and go straight to summary judgment for us. It's just it's pretty bold. They must really think they've got it, which I guess that would explain the idea that they're going to go through with it no matter what, right? I guess at that point, there's no sense in backing down. I'm surprised they even entered mediation. Anyway, I'll read you another paragraph or two before we cut out for a break, and then we'll return and hear the rest. The local attorney general claims the Trump Organization and Trump International Hotel in Washington, D.C. were unjustly enriched by we've heard this, right? Overbilling the nonprofit inauguration committee. We've known this for quite some time, but it's fairly serious. The office, again, the AG in D.C., wants the judge to force the return of $1.08 million in misspent charitable funds. The AG's office wants, in fact, to award that money to another civic-minded nonprofit of its choosing. It's an interesting theory and a good thing to do. Not only did they steal the money, but reminder, the inaugural committee is a non-profit, non-taxed, right? This is supposed to be a charity. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Okay, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Network Radio. Our last segment. Are you ready? Let's return to our reading here from the Daily Beast about the lawsuit about laundering money from out of the inaugural committee. This is probably something we should think about changing, but just interesting, like the framework we work in, that inaugural committees are entitled to non-profit status, and that the funds that they raise are not subject to taxation. Now, these are very political events, but they sneak in under the tent here by basically being, well, you know, they're clearly very partisan events, and they're attended by the newly elected president's top supporters. But the facade here, really, and this would go for anybody, no matter who had been elected president, but the facade here is that this is really a celebration of America and the peaceful transfer of power. There's just only one person and party are really celebrating that. But I guess in olden days we could all get together and celebrate that, particularly, I don't know, whatever. The idea being, well, we all accept the election results. And while we may be disappointed that we or our party lost the election, we all wish the new president the best, et cetera, et cetera. And I think in our new polarized atmosphere, that's easy to call into question. And probably for the last 20 years, 30 years, 40 years, it's been easy to call into question, but it's never been quite as clear. But they still exist under the old rules that, you know, the Trump inauguration, I guess there were still people who were willing to believe that it would be, you know, chiefly a nonpartisan celebration of the American miracle, the peaceful transfer of power from an intelligent and normal type person that actually governed to a complete idiot who had not only no understanding of what he was getting into, but no interest in helping anybody but himself. But we were supposed to celebrate that because, you know, something, America. American exceptionalism. Anyway, but that's why they're considered a nonprofit. And of course, you know, well, we know Trump's records with nonprofits, right? We hadn't gotten to that decision yet, but shortly thereafter, Trump and his family are banned from serving on any boards of any charitable organizations or chartering any nonprofit charitable organizations because of the amount of money they stole from the Trump Foundation and others, right? But if you had that decision beforehand, that would have been really interesting. Well, you can't have a nonprofit designation for the Trump inaugural committee because Trumps aren't allowed to have anything to do with charitable nonprofits because they steal the money from them. But we didn't have that proven yet, even though we all knew that it was the case. They hadn't proven it in court, and so this was their last hurrah. supervising a nonprofit from which they could siphon out money. And guess what? That's what they did with it. Where were we in the reading here? Yes, we had just reminded everybody that it was because the money was stolen from a nonprofit. These were misspent charitable funds, and they wanted to recover them and offer the money to a real nonprofit charity instead. Racine's office is seeking a similar outcome to the victory that New York's Attorney General had in 2018, the next year, over the Trump Foundation. There we are. Forcing it to disband and hand over money to other charities. The D.C. Attorney General's office did not respond to questions, and the inaugural committee's lawyers, K. Lee Blaylock, I guess, B-L-A-L-A-C-K, K. Lee Blaylock II, and David J. Levis, declined an interview through a spokesman who cited the confidentiality obligations that the court required of all parties not to disclose any information about the mediation. The probe is examining how Trump's company and his own family members enriched themselves with the 58th presidential inauguration, a week-long string of events that are supposed to be a national celebration of the country's transfer of power. See? Every incoming presidential administration puts together a committee for the event planning. In this case, the district attorney's lawyers are looking into the way Trump's own children blurred the lines between the family business and what's supposed to be a nonprofit. Investigators suspect, at bottom, the most simple explanation for it, that Donald Trump Jr., Ivanka Trump, and others bilked the inaugural celebration by funneling events to the Trump International Hotel in Washington, where the nonprofit committee was allegedly overbilled on services by the president's own company. And, you know, how many times have we been over this where I've said, you remember, by the way, that the whole premise of the Trump presidency was supposed to be that there would be so much stuff that the government and other related entities like the nonprofit the nonprofit charitable organization celebrating the peaceful transition of power to Donald Trump would not charge money because he already owned the venues. And so much money would be saved by the government and others when Trump waived the fees for using those properties for certain events. And yet he did the exact opposite. What do you know? But anyway, although this court case is civil in nature and must remain so to stay within the D.C. Attorney General's jurisdiction, Racine's investigators could still refer any evidence of criminal behavior to other law enforcement agencies. If the D.C. Attorney General doesn't score a summary judgment win, it intends to continue pursuing additional testimony from key witnesses. As the Daily Beast reported last month, the D.C. Attorney General's office wants to question under oath longtime Trump family confidants who may have important information about recent discoveries in the case. At the top of the list is Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg. Well, I guess is he still CFO? I thought he got bumped out of that while he's on trial. Anyway, Weisselberg, of course, acted outside his company role and reviewed the independent committee's finances. That's weird and wrong. Weisselberg is already on the hot seat. He was arrested last month for criminal tax fraud in New York City as part of a separate investigation. Government lawyers also want to interview Texas financier Gentry Beach, apparently a real name, who was Don Jr.'s friend in college and served on the inaugural group's finance committee. According to investigators, Beach was behind the Trump Organization's plan to reserve a block of hotel rooms at the Madison, Washington, D.C. Now, that's interesting. Like, why didn't you reserve those hotel rooms at the Trump Hotel? They wanted a nice place, I guess. Anyway, that's interesting. So Beach was behind the Trump Organization's, the companies, right, plan to reserve a block of hotel rooms at this different hotel, Madison, Washington, D.C., an arrangement that's now under scrutiny because the Trump Organization, Weisselberg's operation, never paid the tab. Now watch this. When the hotel sent it to a collections agency, then Trump campaign official Rick Gates directed the bill collectors to change the name on the invoice to the Inauguration Committee. The nonprofit ended up paying $49,358. Do you see the trick that happened here? The Trump Organization, Trump's personally owned company, reserved a block of rooms at a different hotel because they never intended to pay for it. But I guess since they were intending to pay for it out of the inauguration, they could have done it at the Trump Hotel and pocketed that money. But here's the deal. They got the rooms at the different hotel and then just never paid. So the Trump Organization wasn't going to let go of any money. But they wanted the hotel rooms. So they stayed in this nice hotel for the inauguration and enjoyed all the parties and then skipped out on the bill. And then they had the inauguration committee. They were there to see to go to the inauguration parties. They made the people throwing the party pay for them to stay in these fancy rooms. That's really slick. Now, as part of their probe of that hotel deal, investigators also want to interview Kara Hanley, who court documents identify as a former executive assistant at the Trump Organization. Judge Lopez has yet to rule on whether he will grant special permission to conduct these depositions now that the deadline to conduct these kinds of interviews has passed. Adding another dynamic entirely to this case is the fact that a central figure in the probe, Tom Barrack, who led the inaugural committee as its chairman, was himself arrested on a separate matter last week, 2 weeks ago now, I guess. Barrack, a wealthy investor and personal friend of Donald Trump, appeared in Brooklyn federal court on Monday to plead not guilty to charges that he used his access to the incoming president to secretly lobby for the United Arab Emirates, also very much in the news these days, and you'll hear more about them during the break. Much of the material I recorded for you already is actually about our weird relationship during the Trump years, and I guess still, and before to some extent, with the UAE. Anyway, when Barrack was deposed in November of 2020 by Lenore Miranda, an assistant attorney general with the office's public advocacy division, he claimed that he wasn't involved in the Trump family's initial selection of venues and that he didn't know about the block of hotel rooms that were eventually paid by his committee. This D.C. case is one of several investigations into Trump and his company that were initiated by local prosecutors and have heated up since his departure from the White House. The most advanced probe seems to be the criminal tax fraud case in New York against the Trump Organization. Another is taking place in Fulton County, Georgia. No wonder he hates Fulton so much, where Trump and his political associates are accused of meddling with the state's tabulation of 2020 election results. Oh, okay. This stemmed from his hatred of them instead. Okay, got it. Very interesting. Oh, look at this. I wasn't really anticipating this, but you know how it is with the Daily Beast. When you scroll a little bit further down, you get the next story. Did you know that the next story was entitled Trump, : that is to say, he now says this thing. January 6th cops who spoke to Congress are, quote, pussies. There you go. He loves using the word, and no one will hold him to account for that, I am sure. Back the blue. Okay. Other items for inclusion, the scramble to include them in the last segment of today's show. I got to scroll down here. There's a couple. Yes, right. We have two pieces, one from the New York Times, one from Politico on the same subject. We'll take the Times in hopes that it will be more detailed. More courtroom doings. I mentioned that this was the case the other day, but we didn't read the article. Trump officials can testify in inquiries into the efforts to subvert election outcome and January 6th riot, Justice Department says. Katie Benner on this piece from July 27th. The Justice Department notified former officials this week that they could testify to the various committees investigating the Trump administration's efforts to subvert the results of the presidential election and the January 6th attack on the Capitol, not just the Select Committee, but anybody who's looking into it, according to a letter obtained by the New York Times. Witnesses can give unrestricted testimony to the House Oversight and Reform Committee and the Senate Judiciary Committee, the department said. Both panels are scrutinizing the bid by officials in the Trump White House to force the Justice Department to undermine President Biden's victory as well as the events leading up to the Capitol riot, as Congress convened to formally tally the electoral results. The officials learned in May that they could provide information about how the department planned for and responded to the vote certification on January 6th. According to the letter, the department determines whether current or former officials can respond to requests for testimony on a case-by-case basis. And the letters to former officials leaves unclear whether the Select Committee investigating the January 6th riot has made such a request. The Justice Department's decision runs counter to the views of former President Donald J. Trump, who has argued that his decisions and deliberations are protected by executive privilege. It also sets up a potential court battle if Mr. Trump sues to block any testimony, which I'm sure he would, which would force the courts to determine the extent to which a former president can be protected by privilege. The only thing that makes me think he might not is he might have to pay for such proceedings. At least pay his lawyers, that means. Mr. Trump's supporters have argued that a president cannot function if privilege can be taken away by a successor, exposing sensitive decision-making and opening up the previous administration to scrutiny. But others say that the matter is settled law and that privilege does not apply to extraordinary circumstances. In his last few weeks in office, Mr. Trump pressured Justice Department officials to overturn the results of the election, asking them to examine claims of vote tampering that investigators said they had already determined to be false. Department lawyers, including those who have left the department, are obligated to protect non-public information they learned in the course of their work, the department said in its letter, which was signed by Bradley Weisenheimer. Really? Weinsheimer. Okay, it's not Weisenheimer. Weinsheimer, a top career official in the Deputy Attorney General's office. The extraordinary events in this matter constitute exceptional circumstances warranting an accommodation to Congress, he wrote, noting that the information sought by Congress was directly related to the question of whether Trump tried to use the Justice Department to advance his personal political interests. The department told former officials that they could provide unrestricted testimony so long as the testimony is confined to the scope of the interviews set forth by the committees and does not reveal grand jury information, classified information, or pending criminal cases. The Senate Judiciary and House Oversight and Reform Committees have asked a few Trump-era Justice Department officials to disclose the pressures they faced to undermine faith in the election outcome, or seek to overturn it in the courts, as well as how the department responded to the January 6th attack. These negotiations were effectively stalled at the Justice Department as the department decided how much former officials were allowed to reveal. Many of their conversations and actions were potentially covered by privileges that the department has long protected to keep executive branch deliberations confidential. The Justice Department decided to let former officials testify after consulting with the White House counsel's office, given that such an authorization could not force current and future administrations to publicly reveal deliberative information, according to its letter. In an unusual move, the White House counsel's office said that it would not be appropriate to assert executive privilege because of the topics that the committees wished to explore, the department told former officials, while Trump's lawyers invoked executive privilege to keep the officials from testifying. The White House counsel's office noted that the precedent indicated that such privilege was meant to be a benefit to the country rather than the president as an individual. That sounds sensible. The Justice Department said in its letter that the decision was unique to the facts and circumstances of this particular matter. Good, the Bush v. Gore of the insurrection. Representative Carolyn Maloney, the chairwoman of the House Oversight Committee, said she was pleased with the Justice Department's move and that she expected prompt cooperation from these witnesses. I am committed to getting to the bottom of the previous administration's attempts to subvert the Justice Department and reverse a free and fair election, she said in a statement. Senator Dick Durbin of Illinois, who leads the Judiciary Committee, said on Twitter that he was working to schedule interviews with the officials. The Justice Department is still sending the committee documents related to its inquiry, according to a committee aide. Documents sent to the congressional panels this summer revealed that Trump and his Chief of Staff, Mark Meadows, were pressuring Jeffrey Rosen, the the acting Attorney General, to investigate claims of election fraud that investigators had found to be baseless. In January, Durbin opened an investigation into involvement by Justice Department officials in efforts to reverse Trump's election loss. This spring, he asked National Archives for communications and records related to the meetings between the White House and the Justice Department concerning those efforts. In parallel with the congressional inquiries, the Justice Department's Inspector General is examining how Trump and the White House pressured former department officials during their final days in office. Mr. Trump has argued that executive privilege prevents former officials from cooperating with the Inspector General, but those officials are likely to consider the Justice Department's contrary view in deciding whether to provide information. Well, that is interesting. Dryly put, I don't know whether Politico made any more exciting spectacle of it or not, but, well, there are other things to move on to, so perhaps we'll do that. This seemed of interest, and maybe we can sneak this in. Does it still reveal as much as I once thought? This is the tweet of Thomas Galvin. Identifies himself via Twitter as, I guess, a attorney at the Rose Law Group, and has this to say. I guess he's also from Arizona. I don't know whether he's still there originally, but he's back to the Arizona fraudit and what's going on there. He shared with everybody the other day a thread in which he describes as a bombshell revelations from the audit's spokesman on all the reasons why the audit is headed to be a colossal failure. I think we had some of those in mind, but let's take a look at this. This is a tweet thread from Trey Terry, described here as, let's see, is this, he's Elise Terry's husband, but who is that? It just is what it says here. They're both from Arizona. U.S. Army combat veteran Elise C. Terry's husband, father, conservative. You know how these profiles go. School board member, blah, 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 blah. But an Arizona guy in general. Anyway, check this out. Arizona Senate liaison Ken Bennett. We heard about this the other day. And I think this doesn't rely on any of the paywalled papers. Arizona Senate liaison Ken Bennett on KFYI this morning, that's a nice name for a news radio station, says, I cannot be a part of a process where I am kept out of critical aspects along the way that make the audit legitimate and have integrity when we produce the final report. Unfortunately, there have been too many of those situations, right? You remember that he was being banned from entry into the building where they were counting the ballots because he had made the cyber ninjas people mad over something, and the liaison from the Senate wasn't allowed in. And he's basically saying, if I can't observe the process, I cannot attest to the validity of their report, at a minimum. It also raises lots of questions about what they've been doing in there. All right, the quote continued. Tip of the iceberg came last Friday when I was denied access to the audit itself. This again is Ken Bennett, the former Arizona Secretary of State, and for the liaison for the Arizona State Senate President, the only person with an ounce of experience or integrity heading into this audit, according to Trey Terry here. More Bennett on the issues with the audit. I asked the auditors, when we are done with the duplicate ballots, please give me a comprehensive reconciliation of, were we able to identify one of these for every one of those? That is one duplicate for every original. And that has not been forthcoming now for 2 months. We can't even answer the basic question of these duplicate ballots that you say represent the entirety of the universe of votes cast in Maricopa County. They match 1-to-1? Can't say. That's pretty basic. More Bennett. There were serious issues in the aggregation spreadsheet when the tally sheets would be carried over to the end of the room and entered into the spreadsheet. For the first several weeks of the audit, there were huge issues with that, and the process has been changed along the way. Bennett continues by saying, I was told by folks within the audit that the main auditor, Doug Logan, had told them not to share anything with Secretary Bennett. The auditors already finished their counting, he continued. That count must have been different, though, than a Maricopa County count, because all of a sudden the Senate started talking about a third count of just the ballots. We heard that news the other day. So obviously, nobody's able to get their numbers to match. Bennett goes on to say, I told Randy Pullen that we need to make sure that this third count was totally independent from the Cyber Ninjas' second count, and asked to know what measures we are using to ensure the integrity of the third count, and he wouldn't tell me. Bennett says regarding boxes of ballots and the Cyber Ninjas spreadsheets, some matched, some others didn't match. There are key aspects of the audit that are not even part of the scope of work assigned to Cyber Ninjas, he said, and some of those other things need to be done independently of Cyber Ninjas. He goes on to state he'd like to keep working with the audit, but not within Cyber Ninjas' realm. And a link here at the end to the transcript of the full interview, courtesy of KFYI, under the headline, Ken Bennett discusses possibly stepping down from the Arizona election audit. The conservative circus, what? The conservative circus, is this going to be paywalled or something? Or is this, okay, I'm just clicking through, and I guess it's not a transcript, but rather a audio recording of the radio interview of Ken Bennett. Okay, well, very interesting. So I'm glad we were able to find one way around the paywall of the Arizona papers. Too bad. I didn't really, mean to cheat them out of any money, but I can't pay for every damn paper out there. Time now for us to wrap things up, I guess. And I think we certainly got a good deal of the bits and pieces that were floating around over the past couple of weeks out there. More to come. And like I said, I warn you, some more information and some weirdness about what's going on over in the Middle East and the UAE and with our Saudish Arabian friends as well. Look forward to that in the coming weeks. And I guess I'll have to give some consideration if I hear from others about the stream not going out as expected today. I guess that might work. That might make a good Monday show to replay today, our Friday show, for you then. But I don't know if that really makes a great deal of sense, since it'll be released as a podcast by this afternoon anyway. Okay, anything else that I'm going to scroll down here and see if there's anything else we can squeeze in the last 2 minutes. I think we hit our mark early. I rushed through some of these things and probably skipped out on a couple of comments along the way that I could have used as color commentary, I guess, along the way. No, okay. Well, that's too bad. Oh, here, I've just discovered a nice big long story I can share with you in one of the pre-taped segments for later on in the week, next week. Let's open that up so that I have it handy and say, all right, I guess that kind of does it in terms of getting things. That actually gives me plenty of time to calmly and serenely read through the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy preview. Once our music starts going, don't need to finish up the any last articles unless I can find in the next 30 seconds a way to screw that up. And anything is possible. Anybody got anything in the Twitter feed to point to? No, I guess not. I don't know what to do with myself with all this extra time here. Well, at any rate, thanks for joining us here. And I'll have to read Justice Putnam's stuff very slowly to stretch it out and make sure that there's plenty of verbiage to go along with the musical bed that usually accompanies things. Okay, I was not expecting this. But here we go. The music begins. Are you ready? Nice little drum beat. Thank you very much. Okay, let's make our way through what's coming up. At least, if the stream's working, anyway, you have that to look forward to. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, as Justice Putnam takes you through the following fantastic selection of stories. A vaccine mandate helped defeat smallpox at the start of the 20th century. Has anybody got any ideas about why we might need a vaccine mandate at this point? Much more in the news. Lots more people talking about that these days. Then, on the rest of the menu, the head of the St. Louis County, Missouri Department of Public Health says a GOP candidate for the U.S. Senate encouraged physical threats and racist slurs from that mob of Trump supporters. You heard from Dr. Khan yesterday, but apparently one of the people who encouraged all this says he's running for Senate. Fantastic. Pacific Gas and Electric will face criminal charges over a deadly California wildfire last year, and over 4,000 flight attendants have faced unruly passengers in the first half of 2021. Bad news out there. Then, after the break, international news, right? An investigative media outlet is fleeing Russia to escape the crackdown on Putin critics, and the State Department lodged concern over harassment of the media covering the floods in China. No idea.
From netrootsradio.com.
Knew about the floods.
You have been listening to Kagro in the morning.
Didn't know about the crackdown.
Waldman.
All right, this is it. Goodbye. Au revoir. Bon voyage, I guess I would say to myself if I wasn't the one leaving. You could say that to me. We'll see you in 2 weeks with more live shows and intersperse the dates in between with some new material here and there just to keep you active, interested in listening. See you later.